Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. Okay, here's the deal, I said, pointing a foam finger at my girlfriend, Kylie, with all the authority I could muster. When my Falcons obliterate your Patriots today, you have to wear an Atlanta jersey to work for a whole week. And not just any jersey, the one I pick. The one with the glittery, obnoxious logo. Kylie just smiled, that calm, infuriatingly confident smile she always wore when she knew something I didn't. She was curled up on the opposite end of our big, comfy sofa, a Patriots blanket draped over her legs. The living room was a battlefield of snacks and team colors. My side was a shrine of red and black Falcons coasters, a Falcons helmet-shaped chip bowl, and a banner hanging precariously from the bookshelf. Her side was a sea of navy blue and silver. It was our annual Super Bowl tradition, a house divided, a relationship tested by the sacred bonds of football. "That's cute, Chris," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "A very traditional, very boring bet." I scoffed. "Boring public humiliation is boring now you're a lawyer, Kylie. Imagine walking into a deposition with matty ice sparkling on your chest." "I can imagine," she replied, her eyes twinkling. "But I have a counter-proposal, something a little more magical." She reached beside the couch and produced a heavy, leather-bound book. It looked ancient, with no title on the cover, just a strange, embossed symbol that looked like a tangled knot. I had seen it on her nightstand for the past week, but assumed it was just some antique she'd picked up. "What's that, a cookbook for witches?" I joked. "Something like that," she said, her smile widening. "My aunt sent it to me. She said it was for spicing things up. So, here's the new bet. We still bet on our teams, but instead of one final consequence, we play for points. Every time a team scores touchdown, field goal, whatever the person whose team scored gets to use a little spell from this book on the other person." I stared at her, then at the book, and then back at her. "A spell? You're joking, right? This is some kind of prank." "I'm a lawyer, Chris. I don't joke about binding agreements," she said, tapping a perfectly manicured finger on the book's cover. "The spells are simple, cosmetic changes, nothing permanent, of course. But here's the kicker, whoever's team loses the game has to live with all the accumulated changes for one full week, no takebacks." I leaned forward, intrigued despite myself. The competitive part of my brain was already firing on all cylinders. The Falcons were the favorites. This was a surefire win. The thought of getting to magically mess with Kylie was too delicious to pass up. I could give her a ridiculous, bright green mustache. I could make her hair stand on end like she'd stuck her finger in a socket. The possibilities were endless and hilarious. "You're on," I said, a grin spreading across my face. "But I want to see this thing work first, prove it's not just a dusty old book." Kylie's eyes lit up. Gladly. She flipped through the brittle pages, her finger tracing some strange, archaic script. She stopped on a page and looked over at the wilting fern in the corner of the room. We were both terrible with plants. She cleared her throat and read a single weird-sounding word aloud. It was a soft, melodic sound like a whispered secret. For a second, nothing happened. I was about to call her bluff when the fern began to tremble. I watched, my jaw slowly dropping, as the brown, drooping fronds straightened up, their color shifting from a sickly yellow to a vibrant, healthy green. In less than 10 seconds, the plant looked like it had been professionally cared for its entire life. I was speechless. Magic was real. And it was sitting on my coffee table. "Convinced?" Kylie asked, her expression a perfect blend of innocence and mischief. My mind was racing. The potential for pranks had just gone from hilarious to legendary. "Oh, I am so in," I said, rubbing my hands together. "The Patriots are going down. And you, my dear, are going to have a very, very strange week." She just laughed, a light, musical sound that, in retrospect, should have been a warning. "We'll see, Chris, we'll see." The pregame show ended, and the opening kickoff soared through the air. I settled back into the couch, grabbing a handful of chips from my helmet bowl. I was practically vibrating with confidence. My team was on fire. I had magic at my fingertips, and my girlfriend was about to regret ever challenging me. I had no idea that I was the one who was about to have the strangest week of my entire life. The game was on, and so was the bet. The first quarter was a tense, scoreless affair. Every near miss, every drop pass had me on the edge of my seat. It wasn't just about the game anymore. It was about drawing first blood in our magical duel. Kylie seemed completely relaxed, sipping her white wine and occasionally glancing at the book, which sat open between us like a mystical rulebook. Then, it happened. A beautiful long bomb from Matt Ryan connected with Julio Jones, who danced his way into the end zone. Touchdown, Falcons. I leaped off the couch, yelling in triumph, "Yes, pay up, Kylie, first score is mine." She rolled her eyes, but the smile was still there. All right, you win the first round. What's my punishment, oh mighty sorcerer?" I grabbed the book, my heart pounding with excitement. I scanned the pages, looking for something fittingly embarrassing. Most of the spells were for minor alterations, changing hair color, eye color, or perfect altering clothing. "Okay, I've got it," I announced. I pointed at her stylish Patriots jersey. I read the incantation from the book, my voice clumsy with the unfamiliar syllables. The air shimmered around her for a second. Her eyes went wide as she looked down at her chest. The fabric of her jersey had tightened, shrinking and reshaping itself. The loose-fitting shirt morphed into a form-fitting, short-sleeve mini-dress. The Patriots logo stretched taut across her chest. The hemline now rested daringly high on her thighs. "Chris," she squealed, a blush creeping up her neck as she tugged at the bottom of the dress. "This is so short." "That's the point," I cackled, taking a picture with my phone. "It's to remind you of your team's shame and your poor life choices in football allegiances." She shot me a playful glare, but she was laughing. "Okay, fine. 1 point for you, but don't get too comfortable. The game is far from over." She was right. The Patriots, as they always seem to do, methodically marched down the field on their next possession. My stomach clenched as they got closer and closer to our goal line. A short pass, a run up the middle, and then a field goal. It was only 3 points, but it was enough. The score was now 7-3. It was Kylie's turn. "My turn," she said, her voice dropping into a low, theatrical purr. She picked up the book, her eyes scanning a page with a look of intense focus. A slow, wicked grin spread across her lips. "Oh, this is a good one." "Whatever it is, I can take it," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. My mind was still on the game, annoyed that our defense had let them score so easily. "Let's start small," she whispered, and read a short, clipped phrase from the book. I felt a strange tingling sensation in my hands, like when your arm falls asleep. It wasn't painful, just weird. I flexed my fingers, trying to shake it off, but the feeling intensified. I held my hands up in front of my face, and my heart skipped a beat. This wasn't a clothing change. This was me changing. I watched in a state of horrified fascination as my hands began to refine themselves. The knuckles seemed to shrink. The light dusting of hair on my fingers vanished, and the calluses I'd earned from years of half-hearted gym sessions softened and disappeared. My fingers grew longer and more slender, the nails stretching out slightly, becoming perfectly shaped and oval. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. My hands, my big, capable, masculine hands, now looked delicate. "What did you do?" I stammered, turning them over and over. "Just a little manicure," Kylie said sweetly, but she wasn't done. She chanted another, even shorter word. A wave of cool energy washed over my fingertips, and I gasped. A coat of glossy, pale pink nail polish flowed over my new nails, shimmering under the light of the lamp. It looked professionally done. Wait, why are my hands so small and my nails painted pink? The words tumbled out of my mouth in a rush of disbelief. I tried to make a fist, but it felt wrong. The motion was less forceful, more graceful. I reached for my can of beer on the coffee table, and the difference was shocking. My grip felt weaker, less secure. The cold metal felt strange against my now smooth, sensitive fingertips. It was as if my own hands were foreign objects attached to my wrists. Kylie was watching me, her head tilted. "How does it feel?" "It feels weird," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "Really weird." "Good," she said, taking a sip of her wine. "Now you know how I feel in this ridiculous dress." I looked from my dainty, pink-nailed hands to her exposed thighs and back again. A cold knot of anxiety was forming in my stomach. I had thought this was a game of harmless pranks, of changing clothes and hair colors. But Kylie was playing a different game entirely. She was changing the player. I tried to laugh it off, to pretend it was nothing. "Okay, you got me. That was a good one. But the Falcons are about to score again, And when they do, I'm turning your hair bright orange. But my laughter sounded hollow, even to my own ears. As I watched the game, I couldn't stop looking down at my hands. They didn't look like they belonged to me anymore. For the first time all night, I felt a genuine flicker of fear. This silly little bet was starting to feel unnervingly real. The second quarter was a nightmare. The Falcons' offense, which had looked so dominant at the start, completely stalled. We punted twice. Meanwhile, the Patriots were a well-oiled machine. They scored another touchdown, then a field goal just before halftime. Each score was like a physical blow, not just to my pride, but to my body. With the touchdown, Kylie's spell was quick and devastatingly effective. She targeted my legs. I felt that now familiar tingling sensation, but this time it spread from my hips all the way down to my ankles. My sturdy, athletic legs, which I was actually pretty proud of, began to change. The thick muscle softened, the lines becoming longer and sleeker. I could literally feel my thighs thinning out, the curve of my calves becoming more defined and shapely. My jeans, which had been comfortably loose, suddenly felt tighter, clinging to a new, unfamiliar shape. "Stop it, Kylie, this isn't funny anymore," I pleaded, trying to stand up. My balance felt off, my center of gravity subtly shifted. "I can't stop it, Chris, those are the rules," she said, though her eyes held a flicker of something I couldn't quite read, pity, maybe, or just amusement. "You agreed to the bet." The field goal just before the half was the final indignity. For this one, she chose my voice. She murmured a spell that sounded like a sigh, and I felt a strange tightness in my throat. I tried to clear it, but it didn't help. "What did you do now?" I asked, and the sound that came out shocked me into silence. My voice was higher, not squeaky or comical, but noticeably softer, smoother. The rough, masculine edge was gone, replaced by a softer, more melodic tone. "Oh, wow," Kylie said, her eyebrows raised. "That one worked better than I expected." I tried to yell, to protest in my usual booming voice, but all that came out was a frustrated, almost breathy complaint. "This is cheating. You're changing my body." "And you changed my clothes," she countered calmly. "The book doesn't specify the type of change. It just says, a change." During the halftime show, I went to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. My face was still mine, but everything else was starting to feel like a bizarre funhouse reflection. I held up my slender, manicured hands. I ran them down my surprisingly shapely legs. I tried speaking to my reflection, and the higher, softer voice that answered back sent a shiver down my spine. The anxiety in my gut had blossomed into full-blown panic. This was supposed to be a joke. When did it stop being a joke? The third quarter began, and for a glorious moment, it seemed like my luck was turning. The Falcons came out of the locker room looking like a new team. They scored a quick touchdown. It was my turn again. Driven by a desperate need for revenge, I flipped through the book, my strange new hands fumbling with the pages. I found a section on hair. "That's it," I declared. "You wanted to mess with me. I'm making your hair a mess." I read the spell, focusing all my frustration on her beautiful, dark brown hair instantly frizzed up, sticking out in a dozen different directions like a cartoon character who'd been electrocuted. She ran a hand through the wild mane and just laughed. "Is that the best you've got, a little frizz, Chris? You're not thinking big enough." She was right. My attempts at retaliation were just superficial pranks. Hers were fundamental alterations. It was like I was throwing water balloons while she was reshaping the very ground beneath my feet. Her words were prophetic. The Patriots scored again. A soul-crushing touchdown that put them firmly in the lead. Kylie didn't even hesitate. She looked at me, a strange, almost clinical curiosity in her eyes. "I wonder," she mused, before reading another spell. This time, the change was slower, more pervasive. I felt a strange heat spread across my chest and a peculiar shifting sensation around my hips. I instinctively wrapped my arms around myself. It felt like my entire frame was being subtly compressed and reshaped. My shoulders seemed to narrow slightly, losing their broadness. At the same time, I felt an undeniable widening at my hips, a gentle swelling that made the waistband of my jeans feel constricting. I sat down hard on the sofa, a wave of dizziness washing over me. My new posture felt different, more curved, softer. To make matters worse, Another spell targeted my hair. My short, practical haircut began to grow. I could literally feel it, a strange tickling sensation at my scalp as the strands lengthened, first covering my ears, then brushing against my collar. Within a minute, I had a shaggy, shoulder-length bob of dark brown hair that kept falling into my eyes. I pushed it away with a hand that looked utterly alien to me. I felt a desperate need to get up, to move, to do something to feel like myself again. I bolted off the couch and headed for the kitchen to grab another beer, needing the familiar action to ground me. But my movements were all wrong. My stride was shorter, my hips swayed in a way they never had before, and my longer hair swung around my face. My own body was moving with an unfamiliar, almost delicate grace, as if it was adjusting to its new proportions without my permission. I leaned against the kitchen counter, my breathing ragged. I was losing, not just the game, but I was losing me. Every point the Patriots scored was another piece of myself chipped away, replaced by something other, something feminine. I looked down at my body, at the subtle curves that hadn't been there 2 hours ago, at the manicured hands, at the way my shirt now draped differently over my slightly narrower shoulders. The reflection in the darkened kitchen window showed a stranger with my eyes, and the game wasn't over yet. The fourth quarter was a blur of mounting horror. It was the infamous 28-3 comeback, a moment etched in the nightmares of every Falcons fan. But for me, it wasn't just a historic football collapse, it was a personal one. With every score the Patriots made, my world unraveled a little more. A field goal made my face change. I didn't see it happen. I felt it. A tingling warmth spread across my skin. My jawline seemed to soften, the square, masculine angle giving way to a gentler, more oval shape. My brow bone felt less prominent, and my cheeks felt a little fuller. I touched my face with my slender fingers, and the contours were all wrong. The familiar angles and planes I shaved over every morning were gone. Then came the touchdown that tied the game. This was the big one. Kylie looked at me, her expression serious now. The playful mischief was gone, replaced by an intense focus. She recited a longer, more complex incantation from the book. The sensation was overwhelming. It started in my chest, a profound and deeply unsettling shift. I felt a strange pressure, a swelling of soft tissue that made me gasp. I looked down in time to see 2 small, distinct mounds rising against the fabric of my t-shirt. They weren't large, but they were undeniably breasts. My breath hitched in my throat. This couldn't be happening. "Kylie, make it stop," I yelled. But the voice that erupted from my lips was not a yell. It was a high, panicked cry, the voice of a frightened young woman. The sound of it shocked me more than the physical change itself. Hearing that voice come from my own mouth was the final, devastating proof that the me I knew was gone. I scrambled to my feet, my mind reeling. My body felt completely alien. I was trapped in a stranger's skin. The narrow shoulders, the soft swell of my chest, the gentle curve of my hips, the slender legs. It was a woman's silhouette. My clothes, which had been morphing along with me, now consisted of a simple soft cotton t-shirt that clung to my new chest and a pair of jeans that had reshaped themselves into a tight, feminine cut. My longer hair swung around my face, a constant, silky reminder of the transformation. "This is the point of a magic bet, Chris," Kylie said, her voice soft but firm. She stood up and walked over to me, placing a hand on my arm. Her touch felt different against my now sensitive skin. "It's not just about winning or losing, it's about understanding. The loser has to feel it completely." I just stared at her, my mind a chaotic mess of fear, denial, and a terrifying, bewildering sense of dissociation. I tried to form a protest, to argue, to say anything that sounded like my old self, but all I could do was stammer, my new voice trembling. But this is too much." The game went into overtime. The coin toss went to the Patriots. I knew, with a sinking feeling of absolute certainty, what was coming next. It felt like watching a slow-motion car crash that I was the sole passenger in. We watched the final drive in silence. I was numb, sitting rigidly on the couch, hyper-aware of every strange new sensation. The way the sofa cushion felt against my softer thighs, the way my hair tickled my neck, the unfamiliar weight on my chest. The Patriots drove down the field, first down after first down. They were inevitable. They reached the goal line, a final, desperate push, touchdown. The game was over. The Patriots had won. I had lost, in every conceivable way. I didn't even look at Kylie. I just stared at the television screen, where the Patriots were celebrating. Their joy a bitter counterpoint to the cold dread filling my entire being. I had to live like this, in this body, for a whole week. The roar of the crowd on the TV faded into a dull buzz in my ears. The confetti fell. The trophy was presented. But I saw none of it. My world had shrunk to the confines of this new, terrifying body. I sat frozen, my hands resting awkwardly in my lap. They were beautiful hands. I noted with a strange sense of detachment. The hands of a musician or an artist, not the hands of a guy who liked to fix his own car. Kylie finally broke the silence. She closed the ancient book with a soft thud and set it aside. The magic, for now, was done. "So," she began, her voice gentle, "that's that." I finally turned to look at her. My vision was a little blurry. I wasn't sure if I was crying or if my eyes had changed too. "You have to change me back, Kylie," I said, my voice pleading, cracking on the last word. "The bet's over. You won. Please." She shook her head slowly. "The bet isn't over. The game is." The second part of the deal was that the loser lives with the changes for a week. We both agreed. "This isn't what I agreed to," I protested, my voice rising in pitch. "I thought you'd give me a funny mustache or something I didn't agree to. To this," I gestured helplessly at my own body, at the soft curves and feminine frame that felt so profoundly wrong. "You agreed to magic, Chris," she said, her expression unyielding but not unkind. "This is what magic is. It's not just tricks and illusions, it's real change, and now you have a week to live with it." She stood up and walked towards the bedroom, then paused at the doorway. "There's one last thing," she said. "The book says the final transformation should be complete, to seal the terms of the wager." Before I could ask what she meant, she whispered one final word. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a soft, definitive sound, a final wave of energy, warmer and more thorough than any before, washed over me from head to toe. It was a tidying up spell, a final polish. My ill-fitting, morphed clothes dissolved into shimmering light and were replaced by a new outfit. I looked down and saw a stylish, knee-length dress in Patriots colors, a tasteful navy blue with subtle red and silver accents at the collar and waist. The fabric was soft and clung gracefully to my new figure. My feet, which I now realized had shrunk, were clad in a pair of comfortable but elegant ankle boots with a low, sturdy heel. A light, silver-colored scarf was draped around my neck. The final change was my hair. It grew another few inches, cascading down my back in soft, gentle waves, the color a rich chestnut brown. I stood up, wobbling slightly on the unfamiliar heels. I felt complete. The last vestiges of Chris had been smoothed over and polished away. I walked over to the large mirror hanging in the hallway and stared at the person looking back at me. It was a woman, a total stranger. She was pretty, I supposed, in an understated way. She had my dark eyes, but they looked larger and more expressive in her softer face. Her lips were a little fuller, her nose a little straighter. She was about 5'7", a few inches shorter than I had been. She looked slender but healthy, with a figure that the dress complemented perfectly. She was me. I raised a hand to touch my face, and the woman in the mirror did the same. The skin was soft, the cheekbones delicate. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. What was there to say? My old voice was gone. My old body was gone. "The spell will wear off in exactly 1 week," Kylie said from behind me. 7 days from this moment. I turned away from the mirror, unable to look any longer. The reality of my situation was crashing down on me like a tidal wave. I had to go to work. I had to see my friends. I had to buy groceries. How was I supposed to do any of that? How was I supposed to live as her? "I can't do this," I whispered, shaking my head. Kylie came over and put her arms around me. Her embrace felt different now. I felt smaller, more delicate in her arms. "You won't be alone," she said softly into my hair. "I'll help you. I promise." Her promise was a small comfort in a sea of panic. But as I stood there, a woman in a Patriots-colored dress, I knew one thing for sure. This was going to be the longest, strangest, and most terrifying week of my life. I woke up the next morning with a crushing sense of dread. For a blissful, fleeting second, I'd forgotten. I stretched, my body feeling oddly supple and light, and then my hand brushed against my own hip. The curve was too soft, too pronounced. My eyes snapped open. It wasn't a dream. I stumbled out of bed, tangled in the oversized t-shirt Kylie had given me to sleep in. The first thing I did was go to the bathroom. I avoided my own reflection, keeping my eyes fixed on the floor. But you can't avoid yourself forever. Eventually, I had to look up. The woman from last night stared back at me, her brown hair a tangled mess around her face, her eyes wide with a familiar panic. It was me, my consciousness, my thoughts, trapped inside this completely foreign shell. I spent at least 10 minutes just exploring, touching my face, feeling the strange softness of my skin, running my fingers through the long, silky hair, observing the way my chest rose and fell with each shallow breath. It was a surreal out-of-body experience. "I called your work," Kylie said from the doorway, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Told them you have a nasty case of the flu and you'll be out for the week." I felt a wave of relief so intense my knees felt weak. "Thank you," I breathed, my voice still a shock every time I used it. I don't know what I would have done. "I told you I'd help," she said, handing me a mug, my slender fingers wrapped around the warm ceramic. It felt good. "Today is for adjusting. No leaving the apartment. Just get used to the new hardware." The day was a series of clumsy, awkward discoveries, making coffee. I realized I couldn't reach the mugs on the top shelf anymore. My center of gravity was different. I nearly tripped over my own feet a dozen times. Everything felt oversized, designed for a larger person. The world hadn't changed, but my relationship to it had. The hardest part was the constant shame. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was an imposter. I spent most of the day in baggy sweatpants and one of my old hoodies, trying to hide the new shape of my body, even from myself. But there was no hiding. Every time I moved, I was reminded of the change, the slight jiggle in my chest, the sway of my hips, the maddening way my long hair would get caught on things or fall in my face. Kylie was patient. She didn't push. She just treated me normally. She called me Chris. She talked to me about her day. She asked what I wanted for dinner. But every time she looked at me, I saw a flicker of fascination in her eyes. She was studying me, watching how I adapted. That night, as I tried to sleep, the weight of it all came crashing down. This wasn't a costume. I couldn't take it off. For 6 more days, this was my reality. I curled up into a ball, my body racked with silent, helpless sobs, feeling more lost and alone than I ever had in my life. "We're going out," Kylie announced the next morning. "No," I said immediately, clutching the hoodie around me like a shield. "Absolutely not. I can't." "We're just going for a walk around the block to get some air," she insisted. "You can't stay cooped up in here for a week. You'll go crazy." "I'm already crazy," I muttered. But she was insistent, and she had come prepared. She laid out an outfit for me on the bed. It was simple, a pair of well-fitting dark wash jeans, a soft gray sweater, and a pair of flat, comfortable boots. "I'm not wearing women's clothes," I said stubbornly. "Chris, look at you," she said, gesturing to my body. "Your old clothes won't fit. And these aren't some fancy dress. They're just jeans and a sweater. Clothes are just clothes." It took another 30 minutes of coaxing, but I eventually gave in. Getting dressed was an ordeal. The jeans were tight in a way I wasn't used to, hugging my hips and thighs. The sweater was soft and comfortable, but it draped over my chest in a way that made the change impossible to ignore. I looked in the mirror and saw a normal-looking young woman dressed for a crisp autumn day, and it terrified me. Putting on the boots, I felt a spark of my old self. At least they were flat. The moment I stepped outside the apartment building, every nerve in my body went on high alert. The world felt louder, brighter. I felt incredibly exposed, convinced that every person we passed was staring at me, that they somehow knew I was a fraud. I kept my head down, my long hair falling around my face like a curtain. We walked in silence for a block. My new stride was awkward, a strange mix of my old masculine gait and my body's new, natural sway. "Relax," Kylie said, bumping her shoulder against mine. "No one is looking at you." She was mostly right. People glanced, but no one stared. I was just another person on a crowded city street. And then, as we waited to cross the street, an older man walking his dog smiled at us. "Good morning, ladies," he said cheerfully. Lovely day. You too, Kylie replied with a smile. The word ladies hit me like a physical blow. He saw me, and he saw a woman, a completely normal, unremarkable woman. He wasn't disgusted, he wasn't suspicious, he just accepted it. My face flushed, a hot, prickly wave of embarrassment washing over me. My heart was hammering in my chest. As we walked on, a strange thing happened. The panic began to subside, replaced by a bewildering mix of emotions. A tiny, treacherous part of me was relieved. I had passed. The world had accepted this new version of me without question. It was terrifying, but it was also, in some small way, validating. When we got back to the apartment, I was emotionally exhausted. I collapsed onto the couch, my mind reeling. See, Kylie said, kicking off her shoes. Not so bad, was it? I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. It wasn't bad, it was just world-altering for the first time. I looked down at my body not with pure horror, but with a sliver of grudging curiosity. Who was this person the world saw, and who was I, inside of her? If we're going to go out to dinner on Friday, Kylie declared on Wednesday morning, you need to learn how to walk. I know how to walk, I grumbled from the sofa, where I was trying to figure out how to sit comfortably with these new hips. Sprawling out like I used to just didn't work anymore. Not in these, you don't, she said, and placed a pair of shoes on the coffee table. They were a pair of simple, black pumps with a 3-inch heel. They looked like a torture device. You have got to be kidding me, I said flatly. Every woman should know how to walk in heels, she said with the air of a sage passing down ancient wisdom. It's a rite of passage. Besides, I bought you a really nice dress for Friday, and it will look ridiculous with flats. I stared at the heels, then at my feet, my perfectly normal, comfortable feet. The idea of balancing my entire body weight on those 2 tiny points seemed physically impossible, but the word challenge had been uttered, and the competitive idiot still living inside me couldn't back down. Fine, I sighed, but if I break my ankle, you're carrying me everywhere for the rest of the week. The first attempt was a disaster. I slipped them on, they fit perfectly, which was unnerving in itself, and tried to stand up. My ankles immediately buckled, and I would have crashed into the coffee table if Kylie hadn't caught me. Okay, let's try this again, she said, trying and failing to suppress her laughter. Small steps, heel, then toe, and engage your core. For the next hour, our living room became a training ground. I shuffled, I stumbled, I wobbled, I held onto walls and furniture for support. It was humiliating and frustrating. My calves ached, and the balls of my feet protested. It was like learning to use a whole new set of muscles. How do women do this? I complained, collapsing onto the couch after a particularly wobbly lap around the room. It's unnatural. You get used to it, Kylie said, demonstrating a flawless, graceful walk across the hardwood floor. It's all about posture, shoulders back, head up. It forces you to have confidence, even if you don't feel it. Shoulders back, head up. I tried again. I focused on her words, on keeping my balance, on moving with a purpose instead of just trying not to fall. I took a few tentative steps, then a few more. It was still awkward, but I wasn't flailing anymore. A strange thing happened. As I focused on my posture, I did feel a little different. Standing up straighter made me feel less like I was hiding. The slight lift from the heels made me feel a bit taller, a bit more elegant. By the end of the afternoon, I could walk from one end of the apartment to the other without holding on to anything. It wasn't graceful, and it certainly wasn't sexy, but it was walking. So you're a natural, Kylie praised, planting a light kiss on my cheek. My face heated up. The gesture was so casual, so normal for her, but it felt different now. A kiss on my new, softer cheek. It sent a confusing jolt through me, a mixture of the old, familiar affection and a new, startling intimacy. That evening, after I'd taken the heels off and my feet were finally recovering, I found myself practicing my walk in my flat boots. Shoulders back, head up. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. For a moment, I didn't see a man trapped in a woman's body. I saw a woman, slightly awkward but learning, starting to inhabit her own skin. It was a fleeting, dizzying thought, and I pushed it away as quickly as it came. But it lingered. On Thursday, Kylie had to go into the office for a few hours. I was left alone in the apartment with my thoughts and my new body. The silence was deafening. I tried watching TV, but I couldn't concentrate. I was restless, filled with a nervous energy I didn't know what to do with. I found myself pacing the apartment, my movements becoming more fluid, more natural with every passing hour. Just before noon, the doorbell rang. My heart leaped into my throat. We weren't expecting anyone? I froze, my mind racing. Who could it be? It rang again, more insistently this time. I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. My blood ran cold. It was Mark, my best friend and colleague. He must have been worried when I didn't answer his texts and decided to check on me. Panic seized me. I couldn't let him see me like this. I backed away from the door, my breathing shallow. I would just pretend I wasn't home. But then he called my name. "Chris, you in there? Man, I brought you some soup for your flu." His voice, so familiar and friendly, made the situation 10 times worse. I was trapped if I didn't answer. He'd worry and keep trying. If I did, what would I even say? Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I made a split-second decision. I opened the door just a crack, hiding most of my body behind it. "He's sleeping right now," I said, pitching my voice to be as soft and gentle as possible. "I'm his cousin, visiting from out of town." Mark blinked, surprised. He was holding a container of what smelled like chicken noodle soup. "Oh, sorry, I didn't realize he had company. Is he doing okay?" "He's just really tired." I improvised, my heart pounding. "The flu hit him pretty hard, but thank you for this. That's so sweet of you. I'll make sure he gets it." I reached a hand out to take the soup, forgetting for a moment, my slender manicured hand. Mark's eyes flickered down to it for a fraction of a second before meeting my eyes again. He smiled, a genuine, friendly smile. "No problem at all. Well, you take care of him. It was nice to meet you." "Christina," I blurted out, the first name that popped into my head. "Christina," he repeated, "but nice to meet you. And hey, I don't mean to be weird, but you have a very graceful way about you. A very natural, feminine sort of poise. You must be a dancer or something." I stared at him, my mind completely blank. He thought my awkward, terrified posture was graceful. He thought my stilted movements had poise. He wasn't seeing a man hiding in a woman's body. He was seeing a woman, and he was complimenting her. "Oh, thank you," I managed to stammer. "I'm not, but thank you." "Well, tell Chris I hope he feels better soon," he said, giving one last friendly wave before turning and heading down the hall. I closed the door, my back pressing against it as I slid down to the floor. The soup container was warm in my hands. My mind was spinning. Mark, my best friend, had looked right at me and hadn't recognized me at all. Not a flicker of suspicion. He had seen Christina, and he thought she was graceful. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in my chest. It was absurd, it was terrifying, and a part of me, a deep, hidden, treacherous part, was flattered. The compliment, coming from someone who knew me so well yet had no idea who he was talking to, felt more real than anything else that had happened this week. It wasn't pity or an attempt to make me feel better. It was a genuine observation from an outsider. I sat there on the floor for a long time, holding the soup, caught between the sheer horror of my situation and the dizzying, confusing validation of a stranger's compliment. The lines of who I was were blurring, and for the first time, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, Christina wasn't just a disguise. The incident with Mark changed something in me. The constant, grinding fear receded slightly, replaced by a strange and unsettling curiosity. I had spent 4 days fighting this body, hiding it, being ashamed of it. But what if I stopped fighting? What if, for the last few days, I just leaned into it? The shift began on Friday morning, the day of our planned dinner out. Kylie was at work again, and I found myself drawn to her side of the bathroom counter, a place I had previously avoided like the plague. It was a wonderland of bottles, jars, brushes, and palettes, makeup. I'd always seen it as a kind of bizarre, complicated war paint, but now, looking at the endless shades of eyeshadow and lipstick, I felt a flicker of intrigue. It was a tool, a way to change your face, to highlight or hide, to create a look. And right now, all I wanted was to create a face that felt a little less like a mask and a little more like me, or the new me. I started with a YouTube tutorial on my phone, propped up against the mirror. Simple, everyday makeup for beginners. The woman in the video was cheerful and spoke with a soothing confidence that I desperately needed. My first attempts were clumsy, My strange, delicate hands felt too shaky to draw a straight line with the eyeliner. I put on way too much blush and ended up looking like a clown. But I didn't give up. I wiped it all off and started again and again. Slowly, I started to get the hang of it. I learned how to blend the foundation so it looked like natural skin. I figured out how to apply just a touch of mascara to make my eyes look bigger and brighter. The most transformative part was the eyeliner. A thin, simple line along my upper lash line suddenly gave my eyes a focus and definition they hadn't had before. It was like a frame for the only part of my face that still felt like my own. When I was done, I stared at my reflection. The face looking back was still Christina's, but she looked polished, intentional. The makeup didn't hide her. It enhanced her, for the first time. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't just see the result of a magical prank. I saw a woman who looked put together, and for some reason, that made me feel a little more put together, too. That evening, Kylie came home and found me not hiding in a hoodie, but sitting on the couch in the jeans and sweater, my hair brushed, and my face subtly made up. Her eyes widened. "Wow, Chris, you look amazing." "I got bored," I said, trying to sound casual, but a blush was already creeping up my neck. "Well, bored looks good on you," she said with a warm smile. Then she held up a dress bag. "Are you ready for your debut?" The dress was beautiful. A simple, elegant sheath dress in a deep emerald green that complemented my new hair. It was more formal than anything I'd ever worn. Putting it on felt like stepping into a different life. And then came the heels, the black pumps from my training. As I stood in front of the mirror, fully dressed, made up, with my hair falling in soft waves over my shoulders, I felt a profound sense of dislocation. The man I had been a week ago would never have recognized this person. This person was a stranger. But for the first time, she didn't feel entirely hostile. She just felt new. Dinner was at a quiet, upscale Italian restaurant. Walking in those heels on uneven pavement was a challenge. But I remembered Kylie's advice: shoulders back, head up. I focused on moving with purpose. And it worked. We were seated at a small, candlelit table. Throughout the meal, I was hyper-aware of everything. The way the waiter called me ma'am. The way Kylie would occasionally reach across the table and touch my hand. The way other diners would glance over, their eyes passing over me without a second thought. I was invisible and on display all at once. The conversation flowed easily. We talked about her work, about a movie we wanted to see, about our friends. It felt normal, almost shockingly so, but underneath the normality, there was a new current of energy between us. A few times, I saw Kylie looking at me with an expression of open admiration. "You're very beautiful, you know," she said quietly, in between bites of pasta. My breath caught in my throat. I looked down at my plate, my face burning. "Don't," I mumbled. "It's weird." "Is it?" she asked softly. "I'm just stating a fact." The compliment, so simple and sincere, sent my already confused emotions into a tailspin. It was one thing to be called graceful by a stranger. It was another to be called beautiful by my own girlfriend. The rest of the weekend passed in a similar, dreamlike state. We went to a museum on Saturday. I wore a simple skirt and blouse, and I found myself enjoying the feeling of the fabric flowing around my legs as I walked. We stayed in and cooked together on Sunday. I tied my long hair back in a messy bun, a gesture that felt surprisingly natural. I was learning the language of this new body, the small things, how to cross my legs when sitting, how to push my hair out of my eyes, how to modulate my new voice so it sounded confident instead of timid. I was still Chris on the inside, but Christina was becoming less of a costume and more of a role I was learning to play. And the scariest part was, I was starting to become a very convincing actor. Monday morning, the 7th and final day, I woke up with a hollow feeling in my stomach. It was a strange mix of relief and something else, something I couldn't quite name. Regret? The spell was supposed to end at the same time the game had. Around 10:30 p.m., I had the whole day to be her. I didn't hide in my hoodie. I got up, showered, and put on the simple jeans and sweater that had been my first real outfit. I took my time, brushing out my long hair, feeling the weight of it on my back for what might be the last time. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at Christina. Her face had become familiar to me now. I knew the shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile. After a week of staring at her, She no longer felt like a total stranger. I didn't put on any makeup. I just wanted to see the face as it was. Kylie had taken the day off work. The mood in the apartment was quiet, thoughtful. We didn't talk much. We just existed in the space together, the unspoken deadline hanging in the air between us. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the living room, Kylie finally spoke. "How are you feeling?" she asked. I shrugged, unable to find the right words. Weird. Confused. Ready for this to be over, I guess. Even as I said it, I wasn't sure if it was entirely true. "Are you?" she asked, her gaze steady and searching. I didn't answer. Later that evening, about an hour before the spell was due to lift, Kylie came and sat next to me on the couch. She took one of my hands in hers. "I'm sorry, Chris," she said, her voice sincere. "When I made the bet, I didn't think it would be this profound. I thought it would just be a funny prank. I didn't mean to put you through all of this." "It's okay," I heard myself say. "It was an experience. An understatement if there ever was one." "I have to ask you something," she said, turning to face me fully. "The book says the spell has a consent clause. It will break on its own at the designated time, unless the subject actively wishes for it to continue." My heart stopped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you have a choice," she whispered. "When the time comes, do you want to go back to how you were before right away?" The question hung in the air, heavy and immense. Go back. Of course I wanted to go back. I wanted my body back, my voice, my life. I wanted to be Chris again. But I thought about the past week, the initial terror and shame, the awkwardness of learning to walk and move. But I also thought about the strange thrill of the stranger's compliment, the surprising confidence that came with mastering the heels and the eyeliner, the feeling of Kylie looking at me and calling me beautiful. I had learned so much. I had felt things I never thought I would feel. To go back now would be to erase all of that, to slam the door on this person I had just started to get to know. Christina. Was I ready to say goodbye to her forever? I stood up and walked to the hallway mirror, my reflection illuminated by the soft light of the lamp. I saw the woman who had lived my life for the past 7 days. I saw her fear, her curiosity, her newfound fragile confidence. I touched my long hair, the silky strands wrapping around my delicate fingers. I looked into her, my eyes. The old Chris, the loud, cocky football fan, would have screamed, "Yes, change me back now," without a second's hesitation. But I wasn't that Chris anymore. The past week had changed more than just my body. It had cracked open my entire world, showing me a different way of being, a different way of seeing and being seen. Kylie came and stood behind me, her reflection appearing next to mine in the mirror. She didn't say anything. She just waited. The clock on the wall ticked closer to the moment. I began, my voice barely a whisper. I looked at the woman in the mirror, and then at the woman standing beside her. "I don't know." And for the first time in a week, I was telling the absolute, terrifying, and liberating truth. I truly didn't know.